And to pay all these
and
coaches, the coaches make a much bigger percentage of the pie in college sports than they do in pro sports. It's not necessarily because they're that much more valuable. It's because there's more money to spend.
That's also where I think the racism comes from, because now you're trying to justify this economic system, which is utterly unjust. On the flip side, a lot of people talk about how the NBA is this woke league, and you even hear Adam Silver praising players for speaking out. Well, one of the reasons for that is that the players economically are the league. And they have shown that this is something that the millennial fan likes when they know their player is a three-dimensional human being. So the ideology flows from that. Like, yeah, we like our players speaking out. And in college, the ideology flows from that too. And it's, we want these players to shut up and dribble.
Yeah,
but
I think that's true.
I digress. You know what's crazy, Patrick, is we've been talking, and I haven't asked you one question about this latest thing. The feds. I got to ask you this stuff, and it can be, I know you've been so generous with your time, but I just got to ask you this. So first of all, how big it's so tough for me in this media environment to know the difference between noise and substance. So how big a deal is this latest scandal? Is this just the latest in an endless series of scandals that are so endemic to the NCAA because of the gutter economy that we've already discussed? Or does this one actually have legs and stick?
I think this one has the potential to have legs and stickiness, depending on how extensive the investigation is, depending how many sort of big names end up revealed and caught up in it. Depending on how deep it really goes into this underground economy that we all know exists, that shows people the details. And if it does that over time, and no pun intended, dribbles out those details over time, so you have an ongoing news cycle of revelations. We know how the news works, right? Like, that works better than one big dump and then everyone forgets it 2 weeks later, right? That will make a difference. And I don't know how that part's going to play out. But if it does play out in the way we've seen in other stories where it's, drip, 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 drip of revelations, I think it definitely has legs. Also, it will have legs from the standpoint of, if it's widespread enough, the NCAA is going to have some really hard decisions in terms of who gets punished, how, why, its own investigations that can only begin after the Fed investigations are over. So there's also a time factor here where it could go over a wide amount of time. So for those two reasons, I think this could be big. I do think what the powers that be in college sports would like nothing better is to basically use this as an opportunity to say, oh, you see, money is corrupting. We can't give it to athletes. They'll double down on their message. Maybe introduce.
They're the NRA. No matter what happens, they're the NRA.
The solution,
no matter what happens, the answer is more of them.
Yeah, or more guns. The solution to guns is more guns. That's it. I say. And
the solution to NCAA corruption is more NCAA enforcement capability.
Right. Now, I do think. Go ahead. Sorry.
Oh no. I have a connected question. I don't quite understand, and you could help me out here. What justifies the presence of the feds here? Because in what federal laws we're talking about? Because that to me is what makes this different from what we've seen before. Because if we're talking feds, are we talking RICO? What is the justification for the FBI being involved in this?
That's a great question. By the way, before I answer that, I want to say one other thing that I think is different about this time is the reaction to this has been completely different than past NCAA scandals. I've seen, at least from the media, I've seen very little of hand-wringing over, oh my God, things are corrupt, we need to crack down, we need to get tougher, we need to put these bad apples in their place. And I've seen article after article after column saying the NCAA system is stupid, the NCAA system is what's corrupt, let these guys be paid, get rid of this underground economy. I've actually seen people understand what's really happening, which is a huge, huge bit of progress from, say, 10 years ago, and definitely from 20 years ago. So I take heart at that. To get to your other question, why are the feds even involved? That's a tremendously good question, and for a number of reasons. First of all, the amounts of money here are not that big, and generally when the feds get involved in investigating this kind of financial crime, or quote-unquote crime, it's for much bigger sums of money. So they're definitely doing this because college sports is high profile, not because it's actually a lot of money that we're talking about here. Secondly, the theory of the case to me is extremely dubious. And this gets to what you were asking. Who's the victim here exactly? If you look at the indictments that have been filed and you listen to what the prosecutors have said publicly, their theory seems to be the schools are the victim here. Don't laugh yet. And that they're the victim because they brought in and recruited and had players playing who weren't actually eligible under the school's own amateurism rules that they create. And the schools didn't know that. And so when they get punished by the NCAA and they lose scholarships or they have to vacate wins or whatever it is, they're the victims, which I think is kind of crazy.
Oh, staggering.
But maybe that's just me. You know, they're the ones putting the rules on the athletes saying you can't get paid, and the athletes get paid anyway. Now they're going to the feds claiming they're the victims, right? Or the feds are claiming they're the victims. That's a little bit sketchy. I do think there are some applications of the law here that probably aren't as much of a stretch. Like in the case where you've got assistant coaches who are state employees, and it seems like they're offering, you know, what could be called bribes or financial inducements to steer players one way or to one agent or another, stuff like that. I do think there are probably laws against doing that. Like that's not a good thing. Like just like in regular business, you know, you can offer people above the board contracts, signing bonuses, finder's fees. You get in trouble if you offer them under the table bribes if you're caught, right? That's also still illegal. Like you can make a case that there's like literal some corruption here with state employees. But again, it's such a small time thing. It's curious the feds would be involved in such a big way. And then the other part of this that I think is very curious in terms of what's the crime here is, to me personally, the only real crime is that when this money flows under the table, it's not being reported necessarily to the IRS. People are getting these quote unquote loans or gifts of money and they're not paying gift tax on it. As a taxpayer, as someone who wants public goods, you know, our government needs all the money it can get. And I find that offensive. And I find it very curious that there aren't actually any tax evasion things in the charging document so far. Like, where's the IRS in all this? To me, the IRS should care a lot more about this than the FBI does.
Very interesting indeed. So it's still a little bit unclear, like where the FBI sees their place in this and why. And I know so. It's also one of those things that makes people uncomfortable. Anytime you have the FBI involve themselves in sports, it has a tendency to send a shiver. And I mean, do you think we could be seeing? I'm just asking you for some predictive power here. Is this the sort of thing where you have NCAA coaches who might end up in a federal prison for doing things that they thought were just NCAA business as usual? Yeah, it's kind of stinky, but we're just messing with bylaws and nothing else. Like, is prison in the future for some of these folks?
I really doubt that anyone is going to go to prison, federal prison, for any of this. I would be really surprised. I would not be surprised if a couple of these assistant coach, you know, plead out and flip and give more information, or have already done that and been on wiretap that we don't know about yet. In terms of sort of getting more information to the feds. But I cannot imagine that any basketball coach is going to go to jail or prison because he's on a phone somewhere telling some runner, yeah, go ahead and make sure the $100,000 from the shoe company gets to this guy's family or this player's uncle or whatever, right? Like, I just don't think anyone's going to go to prison. And I think if they even try to do that, I think they would actually make their case that I think the feds would be shooting themselves in the foot really hard if they started doing that. I think people would turn on this case even more. Public sentiment would turn on it. And I think they would get, like, not only probably lose the cases, but they would get killed in appeal, even if they manage to get some sort of conviction that sends someone to jail. Like, I just don't see that happening. It is not that level of crime whatsoever, if it's arguably even a crime. So, I mean, you could ask a lawyer, you could ask someone who's like really familiar with these kinds of statutes if there's a possibility of that. I just really doubt practically that would happen. I think we're going to look back on this case a lot like we look back on Balco, or a lot of us look back on Balco, for those who remember in the 2000s when the feds were investigating steroid use in Olympic and American, pro sports.
Through Barry Bonds garbage.
Exactly. where do we get to? Once the revelation of steroid use blew over, the congressional hearings, when we got to the aftermath, the actual just sort of legal proceedings, and yes, a few people did go to jail for a little bit of time because using steroids and distributing steroids actually is a federal crime, and also lying to the feds is a crime. So if any of these coaches lied to the feds, maybe someone does go to jail to make an example of them for 6 months, something like that. That's why I think Marion Jones went to jail in Balco. But on the Balco point, right? On the Balco point, right? When we look back now, how do most people feel about that? Most people, even people that hate, if they remember, and even the people that hate steroids in sports or baseball especially, right? Most people feel like that was a big waste of taxpayer money and time.
Mm-hmm.
Like, what exactly do we really accomplish? Like, what was the point of getting Marion Jones to perjure herself, essentially lying about cheating in sports, right? Lying to the federal investigators about cheating in sports, and then gone to jail. And by the way, I'm not a Marion Jones fan. And I don't think she was a great person. And like, I didn't really buy her whole redemption arc, but like, I don't think she should have been in jail. Like, what did we accomplish as a society by doing that? And we don't have unlimited resources either. So what could have our prosecutors and law enforcement people been doing instead? You have to look at the opportunity cost. And I do think we're going to look back, if we're not looking at already, and be like, the feds had better things to do than to worry about whether college basketball players getting money at their table, whether Adidas was and Nike and whoever else was distributing that money, whether coaches were funneling it, whether some shady agents were involving themselves. I just think they have better things to do. And I think most people are going to look at it and be like, yeah, that's the way I think too.
Wow. Patrick, this is deep stuff, man. I just wanted to throw out for myself, because some listeners might be wondering, like, and I get some trolls on this too. This is a little disconnected from what we're talking about, but I've had people say to me like, hey dude, you sound like frickin' Milton Friedman when it comes to the NCAA. You want free market, free labor. Right. That ain't you, Dave. What's going on? So let me say this like just very clearly, and you could say what you want. I'll say this. Read Karl Marx's writings about the Civil War in the United States. Free labor over indentured servitude, free labor over cartel systems, free labor over compulsory labor any day of the week and twice on Sunday. There, just said it.
Yeah, I think on this issue, like what I want is, I'm glad you said that. Like what I think people that are advocates want is just simple. For athletes to enjoy the same economic rights and protections the rest of us all take for granted. That's the trick that the NCAA has pulled. They make it seem like, oh, your athletes get so much. You're giving them extra. Do they deserve extra? We all should decide who gets to have what. They're already so privileged. All that BS. And actually, what people who want athletes to have the right to be paid are asking for is for them just to be treated like the rest of us. It's not to get more. It's to actually get the same. That's what people miss about this subject. No one is actually saying athletes should get special stuff. They're saying they should just be treated like the rest of us. And by the way, since they happen to be valuable, yeah, if they're treated like the rest of us economically, they're going to realize more of the profit they're generating. And there's nothing wrong with that. Even in America, there's nothing wrong with that at all. It's a good thing. We're about free markets. We're about well-regulated free markets. And in this case, they're not being allowed to access the well-regulated free market the rest of us get to.
Damn. Well, Patrick Ruby, thank you so much for your time. How can people follow you on social media and learn more about what you're writing these days?
You can follow me at Patrick_Ruby. That's H as in Henry, R-U-B as in boy, Y, on Twitter. And in terms of what I'm writing, I'm always posting it there, but you can find me at places like NBC Think. You can find me at Deadspin sometimes. You can find me in Washingtonian Magazine, and other places to come that I can't talk about yet. But, I'm out there on the freelance hustle. So,
man, if you end up at The Athletic, tell them to publish about women's sports. We're going to talk about that a little bit later in this week's show.
Yeah. Okay. If that does happen, I'll do that.
If that does happen. And last thing, Patrick, what music are you listening to these days? What are you listening to when you're writing or when you're exercising?
I don't know if you're going to have this, but, I was recently on a nice vacation in Southeast Asia recently. And This doesn't even add up or make sense. I got really into bossa nova music.